In the amazing movie The Whale, starring that guy from Encino Man, Darren Aronofsky recounts the story of a struggling overweight man. In the first part of this movie, he's in an apartment. In the second half of this movie, he's in an apartment. I felt saddest of all when I watched the boring scenes talking about religion, because I know the movie was just trying to save it from a sad story. This movie made me have afterthoughts, and it made me feel glad for John Garcia and Michael Dixon.
Oh, hey, that's very sweet.
Oh,
Nice.
What's up, Ryan?
We're kicking off our second episode here talking about The Whale.
Are you saying you didn't enjoy the fact that the camera only once left his apartment to look back upon his apartment?
We saw a bus at the beginning, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about The Whale.
Someone close to me passed away, and it had an effect on me. You're an amazing person, Ellie. I couldn't ask for a more incredible daughter.
Are you actually trying to parent me right now?
Why do you suddenly need to see her so bad? Why now?
I need to know that she's gonna have a decent life, where she cares about people, and that she's gonna be okay. I need to know that I have done one thing right with my life.
Starring, and I want to call out here, it's Brendan Fraser,
Fraser.
not
Yes.
Fraser.
Yeah, there's
And
no
I'm sure
I.
I will still say it wrong. Yeah, but that's something that everybody says wrong.
I don't know
was
how,
amazed to
because
learn that.
in the David Spade hit movie, Dickie Roberts, David Spade talks to Brendan Fraser and he goes out of the way to say Fraser.
Oh my God, I love Brendan Fraser.
Fraser.
It is Fraser. It's Fraser. Why do people say?
I don't know how American audiences missed that movie.
Has anyone other than you seen this movie, John?
It was in theaters for like half the time that like a Paul Blart would be.
Is
So
this
I
one of those
assumed-
movies that was playing when you worked at that theater and you just watched it
You
a
just
lot?
had
No one
to,
else
yeah.
did.
No, I actually like it was like the first moment I felt optimism coming from an Adam Sandler SNL alum, because it was all about child stars and how they don't know how to function in society and like they fucked up by the system.
Speaking of young actors who got fucked up by the system,
Yes, good
Yeah.
good segue.
this is hailed as a return for Brendan Fraser, and I would say the highlight. But let's go around and give each of our opinions. And I'll kick it off to say, I like Darren Aronofsky. We have talked about him previously to this. I love The Wrestler. This is a good-ish Aronofsky movie that it made me think afterwards, and I did kind of want to rewatch it, and I pulled a John and rewatched it the next day, a rarity for me.
Oh, you watched it 2 days in a row?
Yeah, to even watch something again, much less like 2 days in a row, just because I kind of like it was immediately left after the movie being like, I don't know what I feel.
Well, it
I
was
was
free on the second watch because you can only buy it online right now.
You can only buy
so-
it, yes. I don't own it, so yes, that was the other reason. It definitely made me think, and I feel like Brendan Fraser's acting is awesome, and there were some really powerful, uncomfortable scenes, which Aronofsky does so well. And so for those pieces, it was an interesting watch. The rest of the choices Aronofsky made, like the ending and shot blocking, I thought were odd and kind of took away from it. And then overall, I'm not really sure what the hell the point of any of it was, which I still, after a second watching, don't get. So yeah, it's like, so definitely interested in talking about it, but I don't know what I even feel about it. Dixon, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, we should probably give a very brief plot synopsis, right? There is some plot in this. Like, Brendan Fraser is playing a 600-pound man named Charlie, who is an online college professor who helps college kids write better essays. And he is living alone and has divorced his wife and has a daughter that he hasn't seen in 10 years. And his friend, played by Hong Chow, is a nurse who keeps checking in on him and make sure he's still alive. And he is just committed to not go to the doctor and wait out his days in his apartment. And the movie takes place over a week as he gets worse every day and goes through these different things. And different people come and interact in his life. I had very mixed feelings about this movie. I've now seen it twice, and I think like kind of everything in this movie is either great or absolute dog shit, and there is very little in between. I think Brendan Fraser is really good in it. I think Hong Chow is really good in it, and I think the best part of the movie is really their dynamic. I had a lot of problems with the other characters, but they felt really realistic, and I really bought their bond and understood that relationship pretty well. I thought the cinematography was actually really good. I think the choice to frame it in 4:3 with a 600-pound man in a small apartment was really interesting. That, you know, gives you this claustrophobic feel. You kind of feel trapped in the apartment with him. And the camera is actually a lot more mobile than he is. And so, you know, the camera will be moving around while he's stuck on the couch and he's kind of turning his head around and trying to talk to somebody behind him. And you feel his kind of imprisonment in his own body and being unable to move around to the degree that he wants to. The script is bad. A lot of the dialogue just does not land. The whale metaphors are just so on the nose that I was just like, oh, really? This is what we're doing? His daughter, played by Sadie Sink, I think is just not a very well designed character. She, is just very flat. She's just kind of a huge raging asshole, and that's her thing. And like, I know she's a teenager and she's mad because her dad has not been a part of her life, and she has plenty of reasons to be angry, but like, it seems like every point in the movie she is just trying to fuck with people and enact as much pain as possible at every turn, to the point where it just kind of felt unrealistic to me. And I think, the first time I saw the movie, I was like, I don't know if I really buy this relationship and this dynamic. I think it's almost not the point. And once we get to the end of the movie, we can talk a little bit more about maybe what this movie is trying to say. But I think, there's some stuff in here that's really good and some stuff in here that's just like, like the missionary character, I thought served an interesting purpose to bring the role of religion into play and talk about how that actually can be really negative upon the community and upon people's lives. But that character didn't really make a lot of sense. It's like he's being really rebellious against his family and his religion because he wants to do a slightly different type of missionary work. I was just like, I don't really buy this. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this movie, and literally everything in it either works really well or really does not land for me at all. So I'm interested to break it down and kind of talk through those different pieces with you guys. John?
So I enjoyed this movie. I had a good time, as depressing as it is. Some of the stage play adaptations, I end up liking it because, to an extent, a stage play knows that its characters are over the top or can be flat and are just pieces to move around a board to like get towards something more. That's what I was thinking when I watched The Blocking in the Business, which is the movie term of like when people get up where they are in frame and what they're doing exactly. All I could think about was it felt really forced. It felt like a stage play, like I was watching a community college production of something. And Brendan Fraser was acting the fuck out of his role. It was great. He was the mainstay that like pulled me into it, since he's the central figure. And for me, all of the other flaws, I was like, yeah, I didn't like. It didn't make a lot of sense for the missionary. Didn't make a lot of sense for his daughter to be as like weirdly aggressive and just horrible as she was being. Even in a sense of rebellion, I was like, this feels pushed so far. It was like maximalism of character arcs and archetypes. And then anytime Liz was in the frame and they were talking together, there was like a brother and sister kind of relationship. And that was like real human chemistry. But the rest of it around it was just a stage play. And then just trying to debate back and forth the whale itself and this essay, just, yeah, there was a lot like I was left thinking afterwards. I did not go back and watch it again. I did not have time to do that. I wanted to, because I also was like, I feel like I missed some things maybe, or maybe I didn't. Maybe it was just written that way. But I did enjoy it for what it was. And I found that it was interesting as a stage play adaptation because at times it almost breaches through into like being an actual film that doesn't feel like it's adapted from a stage play. And then other times it reminds me, oh yeah, this is single set. Like this is one place where you're never going to think too far outside of the boundaries of where you are. It's the stage. I found a lot of the camera movement to be really compelling, and at the same time, the characters themselves pushed me away from it. So yeah, turn it back over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, let's start at the top with the aspect of it being a film itself, like adapted from a play into a film. I agree, the use of the ratio cramps it down, which is probably weird for a lot of people watching it on a TV. They probably don't really understand like why now I have so many black bars.
The first time I saw this was at Austin Film Festival, and it was like it had premiered at a different festival, but it was opening the festival there, and like Aronofsky and the screenwriter were there. So it was packed out, and the only seat I could find was in the very front row, like right in front of this massive 600-pound man filling a square. It's like, oh wow, this is a lot.
Yeah. Yep. And the use of staying in the apartment and the kind of ease of like, we understand the apartment and the size of it, this crampedness from it, like that all I think is really interesting. Like that was an interesting choice and something that you can do as a film. Though at the end of the day, in my mind, I'm like, well, on a stage, we would also have just the size of the stage, right? You could make that feel full and cramped, but I think it worked. The blocking and business, which, yeah, for those that don't know, blocking is kind of like where your characters are on the set, right? Like how you have them placed to each other and how they talk to each other, whatever. And business is like when they move around and do something within the shot. And I agree. The business in this, there was a point where it just took me out because I was like, it's just a play. Because if you watch a play, every so often a character just walks to the other side of the stage and then back to the other side of the stage. And then someone else gets up and walks to the side of the stage and then back. And it's just like, that's what you do in plays to kind of give you some action because you have no dynamic camera.
Yeah,
and
like give the people
something.
that sat over on the right some things to look at. And yeah.
Yeah, as they like cut a rubber chicken up that's been used several times over. Yeah.
And that a couple times there were some shots where I was like, okay, this isn't it. And I actually think like probably the most powerful moment for Charlie and for us as an audience and the actual dynamic camera is where Charlie turns around and says like, I want to just do I want to know I've done one good thing with my life. And it's in close on him. The finger, we have this interesting, like his finger is kind of to the camera and then back to his face, almost at an angle as well. So it's one of those like, okay, now we're doing something we couldn't do in a play. And it pushes him up to us in emotion in his face. And I was like, that's really great. And it's like the only thing other than like a key on the floor that we zoom in on. Like there's really not anything else I thought that did anything with the camera that wasn't just like rotating around, or people walking left and right around each other.
Yeah. I will say also one thing that you get with a movie that you don't get with the stage play. I mean, you could get it with the stage play to a degree, but not nearly as intimate as a movie can get you, is the sounds Charlie makes naturally as a human being, like the wheezing within his body, hearing these different parts of him like ache and crack and move, and just like the actual heft and weight of this person is like accentuated so much with the film qualities that are added to it. So
that's true. And he's kind of perpetually sweating, and you can keep that going in a movie or in a stage play. That would be tough, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You're already sweating up there with all those lights. So it's just like, even
that's
more
true.
so. It's dangerous. You have to get him out of there after a while.
That kind of moves into another thing to talk about. I think I kind of get where I'm mixed on that. Like it worked in some places, it didn't. Early buzz on this movie and looking at reviews, there's kind of this same mixed, feeling about it. And a lot talks about, is this movie fat shaming, or like how is the use of the character being overweight fit within the play, and is it that he is just presented as disgusting? And so I feel like we kind of have to talk a little bit about that and address that, because I'm also not sure how I feel about that either.
Yeah. Do you have opinions on this? I would say, having observed it, I feel like it is not fat shaming. I feel like obesity is used here as a means to suicide, to really bring his end around. And it would be different if the play was like, he just is a regular guy who's really depressed and decides, I'm going to take a bunch of pills at the end of this week. Then we're following a different context. And this is where like physically he's pushed to the brink. Like it's beyond taking pills and just passing out and dying that way. Like his body is shutting down actively. So there's like an actual clock. It's Hitchcock's bomb essentially, to an extent. Like there's just a tension of what could happen and when. We don't even know if he would make it to the end of the week. Technically, like we're not guaranteed it, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. I think they use obesity and overeating as a way to explore the ideas of addiction and self-destruction and suicide and things like that, and depression, that I think the movie does a good job of exploring. And I think like the more I think back on the movie, I think the things work if you think about them from Fraser's character's perspective and how he may be interpreting the situation that may not be how it should be interpreted or what is actually happening, what an objective person would think is going on. But he is just so just driven by addiction and the grief from losing his boyfriend that has driven him to this state where he just doesn't care about anything anymore. And even there are other characters like Hong Chow, the nurse. She's like, Charlie, what are you doing? You can't do this to yourself. You're killing yourself. And then she like goes outside and smokes a cigarette, and she's a nurse. And so I think there's an interesting idea in this movie about self-destruction where, we all do things that we know are probably not the best things for us to varying degrees. But I think I understand where people are coming from on the fat shaming thing, but like it's the movie is using that as a vice to talk about these problems. And if it was like a drug addict, I don't know that you would hear that kind of a narrative. But yeah.
Yeah. Also, I just
Yeah.
want to bring up real quick, talking about fat shaming. Where were the people whenever like Date Movie and Epic Movie and all the Jason Friedberg and Aaron Seltzer movies are being written? Because those are the movies that actually like fat shame people. They're like trying to gross you out with people being fat. This used that obesity to make several points. Like it's even in this, the missionary, like him coming through and repressing the urge to tell Charlie that he thinks he's disgusting. It's making a point about one person. He's not the mouth of the movie. He doesn't represent all of the audience's views. He's there to demonstrate that some people are polite to your face and they hold and harbor these truths that they consider to be truths to themselves. And then when they share them with you, it's because they're trying to like make you submit into a way, like to recognize that, hey, you know, your body's different and you should think about that. I didn't feel the movie really was trying to push that kind of agenda.
Yeah, and the movie is too empathetic toward Charlie's problems and endeavors to be making fun of him, I think.
Yeah, it's prevented. It's sad. Like, and there are scenes where, in particular, like when he kind of breaks and just starts eating, that it's tough as an audience member because you just know, like, what's
when he's
happening,
stacking
right?
slices of pizza on top of each other, you're like, oh shit, all right, we're
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, I noticed from in that scene, he like tosses a box of pizza aside and goes to the next one, and it's full of pizza crusts. I was like, wait a minute, this guy's not eating his pizza crusts.
He doesn't. He still got taste.
Some things don't change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gambino's pizza crust is notoriously shit. Everybody knows this.
He's eating 2 candy bars at a time, but he's not touching those pizza crusts.
Yeah. It's all carbs.
Yeah.
It's the same as a character in another movie going on a bender, right? That's, you know, kicked alcohol and then goes back into it. And I would say the wrestler kind of follows a similar path, right? Where the Ram knows his body is falling apart, but keeps pushing himself and keeps going.
Right.
Can't
That's
stop.
a good comparison.
Yeah. And I think that he kind of is slowly committing suicide. And we have we can talk about the truth that kind of keeps coming back up where he's demanding truth from people, but lying to himself, right? That is kind of an interesting theme in here. And yeah, I do wonder, like, well, I'll just jump to that since you brought it up as well about the truth. So over and over, Charlie kind of reiterates this, like, wanting truth and wanting a real essay from his students who he doesn't show himself on camera to.
Yeah.
And who don't seem to exist. They don't really do anything in this plot. They look like they were screen capped once and then just reuse some footage.
Reactions were really like not that big of reactions, I thought. It really felt like somebody was on the other end of a Zoom call telling them like just emotional reference points to direct. They're like, now look surprised.
Yeah, act shocked. Where they purposely set this movie in 2016 because we get news bits that help set the time for us, I guess, to drive home like, oh, he's not doing this because of pandemic. He's doing it because for obvious reasons that he would be doing, he can't get out of his apartment. And he demands the truth from them. And I do think each character kind of has a hidden truth that they're not reluctant to reveal. And at the end, I guess he finally is true to himself in some way, like turning on the camera and
throwing his laptop dramatically across the room. Can you imagine, like, if his students don't know what he just did, right? Like, they're like, wait a minute, what? Oh, I guess his feed went out. You know, it's like,
I guess he turned it off.
Like, I guess you guys succeeded. You got me fired, but you know, you wrote me some honest stuff, and like, I'm out, and just chucks his laptop across the room. Okay.
Yeah. One grand gesture. I mean, well, the alternative is that he would awkwardly end the Zoom call and then go on his way. But I guess that was, at an emotional high.
Yeah, he like reads out some of their truths.
Wait, yeah, that felt a little iffy on the ethics of that. Like, did they consent to sharing this, or is this public board?
I guess the key piece here is Charlie is telling himself, like, he's almost trying to martyr himself, I thought, where he's not actually, he could spend the money to take care of his health, but he's choosing to set it aside for his daughter. instead of actually doing something for her or trying to be a part of her life. He kind of thinks like, well, I'll die and then she'll get all this money and she'll be okay with me, I guess. I don't know, exactly what he thought he was going to get.
Yeah, there's kind of this. So at one point, you watch him even talk himself into believing a truth when he starts just repeating that his daughter must have like taken those photos and shared it and looked up this, like the missionary's family to help him. And that's like so far fetched to me because of how it turns out. And it just doesn't, like, that was when I was like, what's happening? Oh no, I don't understand sort of where this is going with different people's truths, because everybody starts believing. It almost seems like they believe in a skewed kind of view. They never really come to terms with what they've done. Like even the missionary whose backstory is that he stole money and that he's on the run. He stole like $2,000, decided to flee and continue doing missionary work door to door because that's what he wanted to do.
Instead of handing out pamphlets.
That is the start of the Protestant church, everybody. He clearly fled Catholicism and is the Martin Luther of this movie. And he like comes back after Charlie's daughter has narked on him and just says, my family got in touch with me. They said that it doesn't matter. It's, it's just money, which in one way I'm like, that's the family's truth. But he like feels, it seems like next to no remorse for that and is emboldened to continue preaching. And he's like, now I got to proselytize to you, Charlie. Like, I'm going to tell you all about your life. And Charlie's like, you're still not accepting your truth yet. Like you haven't actually admitted something to yourself. So I was mildly confused having Charlie turn around and do that later. Be like, oh, she helped him. She got him back. Like she did these things. It pushes him to the ultimate point at the end where he like stands and reads as she reads and he walks to her. But it just, it's really muddled for me. I can't make heads or tails right now at the moment of what it was supposed to be or what it means. I guess everybody has their own truth.
Yeah, I guess he's supposed to. We have this idea that Liz says that he's trying to see, or I guess his ex-wife, right? That he's trying to see the best in people. Yeah. And just like is constantly optimistic about other people.
Oh yeah, Mary's the full cynic and he is the optimist. And
who openly says that her daughter is horrible.
Yes. Yeah. And fought for custody for that daughter. Yeah. Has not tried to make any kind of means to connect Charlie with her again. Because now she's shielding him. I guess she started her own truth. That is a lie. It gets all muddled, like I said.
She describes her own daughter as Dr. Loomis describes Michael Myers.
It's just pure evil.
There's nothing you can do. It's pure evil.
She's
Don't
like,
let her escape.
Now you know why I kept her away from you all these years. She's horrible. I think, like, thinking back on the movie and seeing it a second time, I think, like, the movie is really about a guy who has kind of just let himself slowly, let things get out of hand to the point where he's about to die and he just doesn't care about himself anymore. But now that he knows he's about to die and he knows he has a few days left to live, he's just determined to, like, when he, like you mentioned earlier, Ryan, when he like turns and yells at the camera, I just need to know I've done one good thing with my life. Like that's basically what the movie is, him trying to assuage his guilt of not raising his daughter and, all of these things. And I think him like saying that people are amazing and that, oh, Ellie just, did that for the missionary kid because she was trying to save him and all this stuff. And everybody's really great. People are incapable of not caring. All of these like cheesy one-liners that he says throughout the movie that on the surface come across as the movie trying to be cheesy and like, oh, aren't people wonderful? And even this guy in this horrible situation can realize that. I think it's actually about him kind of like things have to be that way for him to justify his life and to feel good that he's leaving a daughter behind who isn't a piece of shit. Like, maybe I actually did have an impact on her in these last few days or when I was parenting her early in her life, and I can die and not feel guilty knowing that I'm leaving her this money and she's smart and she's going to figure things out. And actually she's a nice person deep down if you just like ignore all the terrible things that she did this entire movie. So I think that's really what it's about, is like a guy who's about to die kind of in denial, but using that denial as a way to be comfortable moving on.
I think there's an interesting thought in that Charlie left his family behind for his new boyfriend, thus apparently turning his daughter evil.
Yeah.
And yeah,
She didn't have a strong male role model, so she just went to shit right away.
Get the fuck out of here.
That's a joke, folks. That's a joke.
Yeah, that's some new life talk.
That's new life shit.
So then he also pulls his boyfriend away from the church, and that is what the conflict his boyfriend has that eventually leads to his boyfriend apparently starving himself and then committing suicide as well. And so I guess I can see, and it didn't really necessarily nail this point, but I could see where Charlie is like, I ruined both these people's lives, and I just didn't do anything worthwhile then. I just made things worse for people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a certain, it is this, everybody seems to have this fatalism about them. They seem to be imbued with a definitiveness that what they've done cannot be undone to an extent. And Charlie is the only person who seems everybody's still trying in their own way to do something. It feels like just lashing out at the universe. His daughter is just constantly an asshole to everybody, but at the same time, here's where that awkward blocking in business comes in. She always says something shitty to Charlie, but then she'll get up and go make him a sandwich or do these other things. And she's like, to be fair, when she made him the sandwich, she put fucking Ambien in it too. And so there's these moments where you're like, what the fuck are you trying to do with these pictures of shaming him and all this stuff? And so I feel like Charlie's unbearable optimism, I guess is what every character seems to think he has, is the main thing that perseveres him. That truth he tells himself, that lie that he's crafted about this is his final purpose. This week is what this is all about. He's definitely going to make it big. When he saves his daughter and pulls her off the brink, and then this other kid and whatever. But it's still so mixed up, because I feel like even Liz is his, basically Liz is can't help but come back and help him later after she finds out he's been lying to her. He isn't even owning up to his own honesty at times. He didn't tell her anything about his $102,000 he had for his daughter.
Yeah, he's kind of a dick.
Yeah.
He lets his best friend in the world take care of him for free and doesn't pay her, doesn't take himself to the hospital so she doesn't have to take care of him. He says 120 grand sitting in the bank. He's like, oh, it's for Ellie. Maybe you could just be alive and be a dad. What about that?
Yeah. And I think part of that is this meditation on that fatalism, that definitiveness of when you're stuck in this mode of thinking about your life as this one thing, which, it's, his daughter thinks that she's just going to be the person. I'm pretty sure she's one of those assholes that is convinced that she knows the truth and nobody else does. She can see right through everybody, through everything we get. She's very much like a Holden Caulfield, you're a bunch of fucking phonies kind of person. And that's become her truth. She's like, it's my truth to cut through you and see who you really are and tell you that you're a shitheel. And at the same time, she just completely buries the fact that she does have some weird shred of caring about people that keeps her coming back. She needs people. She just doesn't know how to reconcile that. And the same with the missionary kid who still goes door to door, even though he escaped his upbringing and this camp and whatever argument he had. He's still trying to convert people for new life, which is just weird. He's going through the motions of well, I'm going to do it my way, and this is the right way to do it, and this is how I'm going to make my truth.
And he's not even affiliated with that church. He's probably never been to that church, but he just uses the name of the local megachurch to get in the door. And
and he still wants to talk to you about Jesus Christ. He's not fleecing people as far as we know and taking their shit. He's genuinely just I'm just here to talk about how good God is. It's like putting on a blue vest and going to a Walmart and telling yourself I'm an employee here, and then fixing all the shit on the walls.
I feel like I would be more likely to talk to somebody who came to my place and said hey, I want to talk to you about Jesus. I'm just a guy that I'm just doing this. Oh, that's interesting. Rather than I'm with whatever church or organization and I'm here to parrot the talking points they gave me.
Yeah, I would if somebody showed up at my door and said, hey, do you have a moment to talk about Jesus? Because I don't understand him. I would be like, oh, well, come on in. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Have you seen The Last Temptation of Christ?
But yeah.
And do you have 2 hours and 40 minutes?
I think talking about Liz, she's also lying to herself, right? There is some depth there where she seems to think she can save Charlie, but not necessarily for Charlie, sort of a forgiveness from not being able to save her brother,
Yeah.
who is Charlie's boyfriend. I don't think we've said that. And then also she enables Charlie. Like there's so many times where she's like, oh, you're going to kill yourself. This is awful. And
Here's 2 meatball subs.
Here's the chicken bucket.
yeah.
There was actually, in the cut that I saw at Austin Film Festival, there was more gross eating stuff. And they definitely, I feel like because of the criticism that the movie got
they cut
for
that out?
fat shaming, it was definitely not as gratuitous in the version that I watched last night online.
That's saying a lot because it's pretty gratuitous.
But even that being said, I still can't, maybe it's just me, but I can't fathom why that would be fat shaming necessarily, because you're watching somebody, like I've watched friends binge eat. There's a whole YouTube subgenre of mukbang where everybody eats like way too much.
We've all seen the Nathan's hot dog eating contest on the 4th of July.
Exactly. There's like gigantic burritos the size of like your whole arm, and people will just buy that and eat that. It's one of those things where it's like, it's supposed to invoke concern. It's not supposed to invoke judgment necessarily, unless I guess you're a judgy person, in which case you'd be like, wow, they're eating a lot. Yeah, that's the observation. There you go. But it really does bring out that kind of sadness where like, anytime I saw Charlie doing it, I was like, oh, Charlie, no. And especially when he was going through the big binge toward the end, I was like, holy fuck, Charlie, just calm down, buddy. Like, stop. No. And it just created such a visceral emotional reaction for me, where I was like, I really feel for him. It wasn't like a feeling of pity or anything. I just wanted him to stop. And like, he kept telling everybody around him that they were amazing, which is another point. He's a persuasive writing teacher.
Yeah.
Who doesn't seem to be able to persuade himself out of anything. And it seems like nobody around him is really able to persuade anybody else to do anything. Like, so it's just one of those, it's an interesting plot point where the way that he figured out at the end to make a real persuasive point is to sacrifice yourself, which is like the ultimate end. But I don't know. I couldn't tell if y'all picked up on anything else. I don't know, around that particular motif of like persuasion in Charlie's character. He just usually expounded like really flat kind of compliments of like, you're amazing. And like, he's so bad at persuading somebody. He doesn't even list the qualities of why. And it's only when Mary confronts him that they even have a really heartfelt, like, how are you doing? And kind of breach that surface of like, we can be honest with each other now and talk a little bit more about it. But even then he's still just like, she's amazing. Like my daughter, she's so great after she's done all this shitty stuff. I mean,
maybe part of that is like, you know, he's an English teacher, but he's teaching an online course and he's telling people about like topic sentences. So if it feels like it's something that's like, this is, you know, kind of a remedial entry level course, and you know, not trying to, you know, cast judgment on that. I just think like maybe he's not the skilled, you know, literary authority that he thinks he is. And then also I think kind of along the lines of talking about, you know, generally people not being persuaded or being able to save anybody. I think it's interesting that Liz early on like pushes the missionary out, and she's like, only I can save him. Only I get to do that.
Yeah.
And it's like her territory, and she is not appreciative of other people trying to help. Obviously, she and Charlie both have a lot of bad experiences with New Life, and that's driving some of that. But then later in the movie, she's sitting with him and she says, I don't think anyone can save anyone. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of arc for her, and you know, this fatalism where she's trying to save Charlie for years and she's just realized she can't, and therefore no one can save anyone. And then immediately after that, Charlie's like, but Ellie saved the missionary guy because she like sent pictures of him smoking weed to his parents. And, you know, it's like there's that denialism from Charlie coming in and like kind of refuting everything that he is seeing around him in order to make himself feel better and justify his actions.
There is a certain amount of being a parent where you're just tied to your child in an inexplicable way. Like they are just this thing that you created. So I do think there's a little bit of that with Charlie where it's like, I brought this into the world and it just is amazing on its own. There is that feeling of a child. But and then I do think that there's some like in that trying to convince himself like it has to be amazing or it's not justified. Like I didn't do it for, you know, as a good thing, and that I had this marriage and just ruined these two people instead of doing something good. Exactly, it is surface level. Like, he loves her because she's there, and she's amazing because she's there and his, and he doesn't know anything about her. He hasn't been a part of her life since she was 8. And I guess the only thing he's really even kept of hers is this, I'll be honest, not good essay, but she was 8. So, I mean, I'm being critical of an 8-year-old.
Yeah, she's in 8th grade. I think there were some lines from the essay that's like, oh, that's interesting. But then, like, the lines that he really cared about was repeating. It was like, the book made me think about my own life. Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that, please? Like,
Yeah.
It mostly describes the book, which is something he just like chides his class about too. Like, you didn't tell me anything about it.
The one thing that I found interesting was he does this with Ellie a few times where he'll ask her for something, anything at all, and her overbearing negativity is the truth for him. Like, she wrote that poem that's like mocking him, and it's a haiku. So there's at least a little effort put into trying to shit on what he wants her to do. And for him, he takes that and he's like, that's a sign that she like really does care. And she understands. And he's like, all right, I'm making progress with that. I think he sees that he obviously sees that in the essay, and it comes around that moment where Ellie basically projects her own opinions onto Herman Melville, where she's like, oh, all the parts about the whale being, just describing the whale were just so sad because it's so boring. You can tell that the writer just doesn't want you to think about their life. And that's, I guess, all that Charlie really wants to see out of her is, yeah, just do that like all the time. Even when he submits that same essay and flunks her, gets her flunked.
right.
He's like, yeah, I shared it because it's a great essay. Like, it's a great essay because you're being true to yourself and your truth. This is kind of like this movie in a way. It's moving and it's encouraging, and in another way, it seems very dangerous.
Yeah. Dixon, you brought up the script. This movie isn't painting with broad strokes. It's dumping paint on the entire building all at once. Like,
There's no brushes involved.
And that's one thing that, I feel like it tries too hard, almost pretentious to a point with its script, that I do think takes away from these character moments, these actual interesting things to think about these people.
Yeah, I think so too. And that kind of threw me off the first time I saw the movie, and it kind of kept me from appreciating what Fraser's character was going through to the degree that I did on the second watch, where I was able to kind of like get past some of the less than great writing and some of the characters that were really flat. And I was like, well, what's going on with this? Is the interesting character in this movie, Charlie and Liz. Like, I want to see what's going on with them and focus more on their journeys. That stuff was a lot more interesting.
I also, like, a pet peeve of mine as well, not just that with the script, but also like, it's always raining. It's always raining. And then it's sunny at the end. Like, these things are just like so obvious. Of like, oh, look at me, I'm doing something symbolic, right? Like, that just is too on the nose, too on the nose.
One of my favorite characters, probably my third favorite character after Charlie and Liz, was Dan, the pizza guy.
Dan, the pizza man.
That guy was awesome. He came every night with 2 pizzas, and Charlie was like, there's money in the mailbox, just leave it, because he was too embarrassed to go outside and actually interact with the pizza guy. And the pizza guy is so concerned every time he comes. He's like, are you okay? Like, I've been delivering pizzas here for a while. I just want to make sure everything's all right in there. And he's like, yeah, thanks, Dan. Appreciate your concern.
Yeah. Again, another character that demonstrates Charlie's inability to commit to truth, even though he enforces it on everybody else.
Yeah.
Just constantly like, yep, I'm good. And then the moment Dan and him lock eyes when he steps outside, my heart broke. I was like, oh,
yeah,
that sucks. Dan probably feels like an accomplice to something now. And it's like, oh.
Yeah, that was rough, right? And that kicked it off. And again, kind of getting back to, if this was a movie where there was addiction or alcoholism, drug addiction or alcoholism, I'm thinking of Train Spotting or Requiem for a Dream. It doesn't really stand out to people as much. Like, they kind of just expect that of like, oh, then the person, goes on a drug binge or drinks a whole bunch, and then that's what ruins or kills them or whatever. But here, eating is portrayed in the same way. It's interesting that that's kind of rubbed people the wrong way. That And Aronofsky, I think he kind of hits on these same beats, which is why I guess he was pulled to this script. Somewhat the religious piece, because he's been on a kick for that recently. But this also, like, person who's kind of just like slowly destroying themselves through some kind of addiction. And here, I think it's just another addiction. Like, I don't think this is really
I
trying to
agree.
present it as specifically the food or being overweight or anything. It's just the same as these other characters who are falling apart in their own way.
Yeah, I think the wrestling parallels are really strong. The wrestler, not the wrestler.
The wrestler, yeah.
The wrestler parallels. I think the wrestler is a much better movie, but I think there's a lot of those ideas put into the whale for sure.
Yeah, I want to touch on, this is another one of my points of like this versus other Aronofsky films, like where it kind of falls. Because I really do like Aronofsky. I think he does present some really interesting view. I think he creates some scenes that are very visceral. I watched this movie twice. I'm not sure I can ever watch Requiem for a Dream again. And I've watched The Wrestler like 10 times.
Yeah.
Even though there are really rough things in that as well.
Have you seen Mother?
No, I haven't. I miss like Mother and Noah. So I kind of missed the more recent ones. Yeah, so I'll need to catch up on that. But with you having seen those, like, how does this kind of fall against, his resume?
Yeah, I think it's a lower Aronofsky film for me. I think Black Swan and The Wrestler are, kind of his best things that I've seen. Also, Mother is really good, I think. Mother is a very polarizing film. A lot of people hate it. It made my top 10 in 2017. So that's probably going to be up there in that top tier for me as well. And then I didn't really like Requiem for a Dream. I felt like it was just a Nancy Reagan PSA, like, hey, don't do drugs, kids. I was like, I get it. I'm not going to do drugs. And then I didn't like Noah that much. The Whale is probably better than those two.
Anything's better than Noah.
But it has, it has a lot of problems like we've talked through, but there's a lot of good stuff in here that mirrors his better films, but there's stuff here that just doesn't work that well. So I would say like mid to low tier Aronofsky, but bottom 50%.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many of Aronofsky. I mean, I've seen The Wrestler and Black Swan and Noah. I haven't seen Requiem. I don't think I've seen Mother either, but yeah, I would say that this is probably lower than, obviously The Wrestler's my top. But everything else is kind of like, yeah, The Whale's under there because of, I think it's partially just because it feels so forced at times. The shot blocking, especially the dialogue, all of that, like it really is carried by some cinematography and mostly just like Brendan Fraser's performance and Han Chow, like them just knocking it out of the fucking park whenever they're on screen together or whenever Brendan Fraser's on screen. It's just like, which is most of the time. So
both of them nominated for Oscars. So this will post after the Oscars, but we're recording before the Oscars. So, well, you'll know by the time you listen to this, but
yeah. So that's kind of where it stacks up for me. Noah's at my bottom, and Noah I think will always be at the bottom for me. It depends when I see Requiem, what I feel, but I watched that thing in theaters and man, that was a rough time for me. It's just like, oh God. Sure. Yeah. What about you?
He also
Ryan?
did Pi. That's the other.
I haven't seen that one. I actually read that they're re-releasing that in theaters on Pi Day this year.
They are.
So like in a few days, that is going to do like a 1-day IMAX release, I think.
Interesting.
Pi, I think I enjoy the roughness of it when I first saw it because it's that independent, early breakthrough, Aronofsky pouring his heart out. Making a lot of like interesting decisions, like trying to really kind of push some things. And so it's interesting in that way. And then I like Requiem for a Dream as a movie that makes you feel horrible and presents some really horrible people in horrible situations.
It has Jared Leto in it too, and like that's always a problem for me.
Yeah. It was when he was like okay-ish, like before he got
it was before Morbin time. So
yeah, oh God. And
yeah.
So Samuel Hunter himself is gay and he was Mormon. And my understanding is in the original play, it was Mormons. So someone studio wise or something was like, well, let's not upset the Mormons, but I can't see how they would
those
watch this
vicious
movie.
Mormons.
Yeah, I can't see how they would watch or like this movie anyway. So that's not really a concern. Did you piss off the Amish too while you're at it?
The aesthetic of that character was very Mormon, like clean cut, young white guy in like a, button down and a tie knocking on doors.
Showing up at your door. Yeah. And so I do see the heart of a character who isn't living their truth and is conflicted by, the flesh and the soul and all of these pieces that get through, but the script got kept so stage play.
Yeah.
And someone else needed to come in and give it a movie treatment push up, in some way.
Yeah, Aronofsky talked about how like he had thought about trying to expand it outside of the apartment and make it more like a movie, but he just really wanted to like do kind of a straighter play adaptation and explore the small interiors of this space with that large character. And some of that stuff works. I think it's just like one, it's just kind of unrealistic to have all these people parading in and out of there all the time. And then two, like those characters are just so flat. If they had written better characters for his daughter and for this missionary and other people, I think it could have worked really well in the setting that it was in. I think sometimes play adaptations that feel like a stage play can work really well. I think Fences is a great example of that. I don't know if you guys saw Fences from a few years ago. Denzel Washington and Viola Davis were really great in that. And it feels like a stage play. It's like set in this house, and it's pretty much just kind of two people talking and going over these, emotions of a husband and wife. But I thought it was really good. And so it's sometimes movies like that, I'm like, I wish that you would take advantage of the fact that you're a movie and do some other things rather than just kind of have characters saying emotional things back and forth, standing in one place. But sometimes it can work pretty well. And I feel like The Whale could have been a lot better if it had just had a little bit better side characters, and the premise and the approach could have worked. And I do think it did. Like overall, I was a thumbs up on this. I think the good stuff outweighs the bad.
We do get a couple glimpses out. The movie starts on a bus where our missionary character, I'm totally forgetting his name, gets off, and that's Thomas. That's where we start. We do have a flashback to a younger Charlie and his daughter on the beach. That's something you could have done that makes it a little bit more movie if you'd flash back to some other things, and then you could have this contrast of a previous life and the current life. And that's something that you can, in a play, that's hard to do, right? To like give two things a juxtaposition like that of two different time frames. So that could have maybe played a little bit, but again, you can have a movie that's just all in one apartment. The Room is amazing, so it works just fine. So then the ending of this movie,
we got to talk about the ending.
Yeah, we got to talk about the ending. And then my other question is like, is he the whale or is he Moby Dick? I'm sorry, is he Ahab? Yeah, is he Moby Dick or is he Ahab? Like, I didn't necessarily get exactly if he was the whale other than in size.
Is he Ishmael?
No, it's got to be one or the other. He's either the whale, he's either the emotionless whale as described in the, that doesn't know what's going on, or he's Ahab. I do think maybe to me it's more that Ahab where he thinks he can redeem himself in this way. If he can just get his daughter on board, and he's somehow so locked into that he's destroying himself and everyone around him for something that honestly he probably can't do or doesn't do. I'm not sure.
Yeah. He's both, right? He's like Captain Ahab who's trying to kill himself,
That's
and
fair.
He's the whale.
So yeah, the ending of the movie, which I understand is like slightly different from the play, but more or less the same. He has tricked Ellie into turning in an essay that is her old essay that he's gotten, I guess, after he left, that he's locked onto as some truth about her I think in a time before, right? He looks at it as this, like, that's who she was right before I fucked everything up.
Well, it's from her 8th grade English class. So it was after he left the family and his wife had given it to him at some point. But like, she's failing high school and she comes to him. He's like, I'll help you with your essays, like, so you can maybe try to pass and graduate. And then turns in an 8th grade essay to a senior English class as if this is going to turn things around from her. Like, he's sabotaging her chances to graduate.
Again, I'm just like, he doesn't see anything that he's doing.
Yeah.
He really doesn't. He's just he's so fixated.
He's doing something good for her, right? It's horrible.
Yeah.
But he's actually good, right? It's the same thing with Thomas, I guess, in a way where Ellie does something horrible, but apparently it's going to be good.
It's so weirdly inadvertent. It seems almost like, I know like Ahab's so fixated on trying to kill the whale that it like blinds him to anything else in a way. And it makes me think that that's kind of the same case for Charlie, where he's just going to keep telling himself that this is good for them. And it like it really still doesn't really stick with me, like any of what happens at the end. Some of the characters never really come to that truth. And so it made me think, is this like supposed to be more of a cautionary performance in telling you how dangerous it is, like what it does when only this room of people, like 5 people who are concealing truths from each other and all have their own vices. Like clearly Ellie has some vice for posting everything to social media and sharing all of her fucking mind. Charlie has his vice of food. Mary has liquor. Smoking for Lizzie, and then Thomas is like, I guess, a stoner who ran away and stole money. Like that was, I don't know if that's his vice or if it's
his
Jesus.
vice. He's proselytizing.
Yeah, he's getting high on God, everybody. But like, they all bang around in this screenplay and this performance, and it leads to like what seems like more and more suffering. But they keep coming back to each other, and I think that's where like Charlie's whole line about, do you ever get the feeling that people are incapable of like not caring? It comes into play. Like no matter what, even if you're a horrible person, something about you will bring you back to humanity. And if that's the message at the end of it, then it's like, that's kind of inspiring, I guess, from like the most bleak place possible, which is how this seems to end for me. I feel like even the metaphor of Charlie releasing and like flying up into he's finally back on the beach and it's this memory. Like realistically, where he's at right now is he probably fell over dead and is now like in front of his
fell over
daughter.
dead either way.
Yeah, it's true. He fell over dead either way, but now he fell over dead and he felt good about it, I guess.
The image of him lifting off the ground and the light shining in like this heavenly light, I was just like, oh my God, could this be any more ham-fisted in the way they're showing this thing? Like, but I actually think it's bleaker than you were saying, John. I think like, all those statements by Charlie are just him justifying himself and not actually true or wisdom.
He's feeding himself physically and mentally, Dixon.
Yes. And I think that, basically at the end of the movie, he's like, oh, I finally did it. Like, maybe my daughter doesn't hate me and I did something good. And he's just convinced, yes, I can finally die now, but it's actually just super sad and pathetic and pointless.
Oh, so you mean it's like Brazil?
I was gonna say that was my thought. That was my thought.
Except there's not like a massive ministry of truth.
There's not a bureaucracy that's trying to. Yeah.
It's not about government overreach. But yeah.
In previous films, Aronofsky tends to leave things more open-ended, and it was interesting to me that in the play it is more open-ended. Like we kind of hear some waves. This is what I read of the play. You hear some waves, and then it kind of cuts to black after he's walked over and you don't really know exactly what to make of it. But then Aronofsky was like, no, I need it to be this more ham-fisted thing that he does actually get saved, I guess. It was interesting to me because I would have thought this would have just been like, nah, it's over, and you just have to think about like, did he get what he wanted or not? The way you think about religion, right? There's sort of this like faith that you can have a faith that he was good and good things happened after this, or not and not know or be cynical about it yourself. But here instead it kind of gives us something that I'm like, did it earn that? I don't really understand.
I think he did get what he wanted, but the sad thing is that it was at the expense of everyone else around him in that movie. And nobody else got what they wanted. Maybe his daughter got what she wanted because he like promised her some money, but she's like not legally old enough to get it yet. So I don't know, who knows if that would actually come to fruition.
I think she wanted revenge. She wanted revenge against her dad. Like, that's why she was so harsh on him from every statement she made to him. Like,
stand up and walk over here, you fucking bitch.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. From the very beginning. Yeah. She's trying to make that hate.
I guess it could still be interpreted multiple ways. I know that like he's achieved his salvation, but we're still here kind of trying to think on, well, what really does happen after that? Like in the physical space that he occupies, because I guess that's where it shifts into being a visual metaphor and becomes much more of like he's returned to, he feels like he has restored things. He's returned to that beach, the like halcyon days before he betrayed his daughter, before he killed his lover, or feels that he killed his lover, drove him to die, something like that. This like pre-guilt basically. And that's like all that he was trying to do in the last week was feel that. And whether or not that's actually true, I guess is irrelevant because he believes it to be. And that's the kind of subtext of the entire feature is like, whatever you believe to be true is what's going to be true to you. And then you're going to encounter other people who are trying to hide their truth or expose it in different ways to achieve what they need to live their lives. And that's where it comes into me being like, is this observational performance like a cautionary tale for you? Or is this a meditation on what does that mean for you? And what does it make you think about what you're hiding from your friends or your family? Talking about Samuel D. Hunter having been gay and been in the Mormon church gives me a lot of that vibe of like, I can see it instilled in here. There is very much that conflict of like, what do I expose when, and how do I tell you about your truth? And like that frustration of wanting to just share yourself with somebody. And then it having detrimental effects, worrying that your family finds out something about you, worrying that your lover finds out something about you, or that you pull them away from something that they love because of trying to live to a truth, just trying to like adhere to a narrative you've built for yourself and what it can cause.
Yeah. If only it was more subtle.
Yes.
It could actually be
more
like,
subtle.
Yeah, you could actually think on it instead of, I guess what we got. All right, I guess we'll go around on whether we would recommend this. The performances are really excellent, and it is interesting if you're an Aronofsky fan. Like, I think it's, worth a watch to see how he's trying to cram this apartment onto the screen and kind of does pull that off. But to a general audience, Darla watched it and was like, I don't think she liked it, but she couldn't tell me. It was kind of the same thing I guess we all have here. She couldn't tell me that she didn't like it or that she did like it. She wasn't really sure what to make of it either. And she did complain that it seemed like it was supposed to be a movie where he started to try to lose weight, but he didn't. And that didn't seem to have anything to do with it. Like, that's kind of what you would expect. And so she also was like, I don't really know. Like, did he get redeemed? I don't know. And so, yeah, I think it's a little artsy. I think it's pretty hilarious to try to use maybe the greatest American novel of Moby Dick to be the trappings around your little play.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's just a little too ham-fisted, but worth a watch for like, if you're, hey, you want to see great performance, you will see a great performance. Like that is somewhat worth admission price. Now that I own this movie, I have to justify it. This is what John always does. Now that it's on my shelf, I have to give a reason.
Ryan's gonna watch it again later tonight.
Yeah, just to get my money out of it. Dixon.
Yeah. So like I said, I thought there were a lot of things that were really good, a lot of things that were really not good, and I constantly felt that both times I watched this movie. Like, oh, that's great. Oh God, this is not great. And overall, both times I came out positively. Like, there's enough good to outweigh the bad. Fraser's really great. Hong Chow is really great. And there's enough stuff there that I think is worth it for people to check this out. It definitely does feel like a play. And if that's not your thing, then, maybe don't seek it out. But I do think it's worth watching. But, obviously we only have so much time. And if you're judging this against other things, if you like plays, I would go for it. If you don't, maybe look at another direction.
John?
Yeah, my truth is that I would recommend this to almost anybody for a single watch, and mostly because it feels fresh to me for a dramatic experience, for a meditation on self-destruction. As ham-fisted as it is, the performances are so solid between Hong Chow and Brendan Fraser, and the cast around that helps. Here and there they come in and it's okay, but really they carry that movie so well that it's hard for me not to recommend it for a single viewing at the very least. So yeah.
Well, that's the number of times you've seen it. So.
That's right. And I might, now that I own it, I have to justify it. I might go back and watch it more times. Who knows? But yeah, it is one of those, like, if you're in the mood for a stage play kind of experience, it's going to get you. I feel like it's like in the middle of stage to cinema adaptations. It doesn't just fully go into like shooting from a static angle several places. The camera's movement is so dynamic. It makes it much more engrossing. So I would recommend it.
Sounds good. Thank you for joining us for our afterthoughts. Maybe next time we'll talk about The Whale Returns, where it absolutely undercuts everything that this movie did and adds in a CGI rock.
Like Brendan Fraser just wakes up on the floor of his apartment. He's like, oh God, I got to get my life in order.
Yeah. What's the asylum version of The Whale, Ryan? Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
The walrus.
The walrus. The walrus. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. There you go. Tune in for the walrus review.
So Paul McCartney stars.
It's just Tusk.
That's just Tusk. Well, once again, as always, Ryan King signing off. And
John.
And Michael Dixon, thanks for putting up with our bullshit.
Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.